Ram Gopal Vallat. Uh, I will leave his introduction to Raj, who can probably do his introduction off the cuff, where I like to read out from a paper. So I will leave the introduction to Raj. But Ramji, thank you very much for making the time. And
Most welcome.
welcome to this group. I was relieved when you told us 2 days ago that you had not addressed any other CFI group so far. So it's the first time anyway.
Yeah.
I also want to welcome all the other people who have joined from CFI. Thank you very much. Friday evening is not always ideal for some people. I know some people say it doesn't matter, every day is Friday for us. But thank you very much for joining. And I'm sure it will be a very absorbing session. So yeah, Raj, can I hand it over to you?
Sure, Ravi. Thank you so much. Once again, Ramji, a very warm welcome. For all of you, Ramji's full name is Ram Gopal Vallat, but he's much more popularly known as Ramji. So that's how we'll call him today. This session actually was inspired by the previous session that Ravi really organized for us. It was a really inspiring session. This was by Shailesh Chandra, the Managing Director of Tata Motors Passenger Vehicle and Electric Mobility. And what he really conveyed and talked about was how Tata Motors handled adversity as a business and as a challenging business, how they achieved a turnaround through an inspiring leadership and his leadership insights, talking through a turnaround story of the business that was going through adverse circumstances. As I was listening to that session, I was thinking about how does a business leader handle personal adversity? Team adversity. After all, it is individuals and people who drive businesses. So that was the thinking process when I first spoke to Ramji. And I thought there was no other person who can handle this topic on leading through adversity, leading through personal adversity, even more specifically. So with that background, let me talk about Ramji's personal background. He's an IIT Madras and XLRI alumnus. So we share an alma mater, so special reasons to welcome him here. His CV actually reads phenomenally well. He's been one of the youngest business heads in the Sunrise Telecom industry. He was a director both at Dell and HP during their growth phases. But as I mentioned in an earlier mail that was sent out introducing Ramji, at some stage in his life, a significant curveball impacted his career growth. But the story behind that was really how did Ramji address a setback and converted it to a reset in his life? And how did he become from a career professional and repivoted it into a number of different phases of his career? And most importantly, he is now a well-known keynote speaker. He is a best-selling author of 3 books. Writing the 4th, Ramji?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Taking a breather right now.
Okay. Coming back from Goa, you need it. A tech co-founder, and he's also a consultant to the Asim Premji Foundation on social impact, etc. So what we will ask Ramji the topic that I suggested to Ramji is really talking about how do business leaders handle adversity? How do you navigate personal adversity that every one of us goes through? And at different stages in life, how does one handle different curveballs? Not just oneself, but through your teams, through your colleagues, through your peers. And especially during these COVID times, handling those personal adversity was something that every business leader had to empathetically lead and support. So with that brief introduction, and of course, we'll leave it to a further conversation going forward. I'll hand it over to Ramji to carry on this session. But I just wanted to talk about one particular message that I remember the former dean of XLRI once told us at his convocation address. He said, "I wish you all a hard and a tough life." That was a very, very difficult message to hear on what you would expect as an uplifting convocation message. He said, "I wish you all a hard and a tough life, for that is what will bring out the best in you." So with that kind of a motivation, if you would call it a motivation message, I'll pass it on to Ramji to talk about everything else he wants to talk about.
Thanks, Raj. I think the dean must have met me before he made that statement, I think. Anyway, thank you so much for this opportunity. I have no words to describe how delighted I am to be able to address so many of you stalwarts who have so much of experience and so much of knowledge in many fields. I feel really grateful for the opportunity. I have taken on a very empowering goal for myself, which I will reveal as we speak. But I think ensuring that I address all of you would take me a long way towards achieving that goal. So, so I have to start with a little bit of background about myself. I come from Kerala. I am a Malayali, and I studied in a Malayalam medium government school in a very small village called Mulamatam. Mulamatam, by the way, the literal translation means the tip of the corner. So Mulamatam was actually quite tucked away in a corner of Kerala. And the only school available was a government school, which is a Malayalam medium school, and I studied there. So the school had about 20% pass percentage, and everything was obviously taught in Malayalam. Physics, chemistry, mathematics, even English actually was taught in Malayalam in my school. The uniform was white shirt and munda, which is the Kerala version of the dhoti, and chappals if we can afford it, which about 15 to 20% of the school could afford. I believe that studying in a school like that, with classmates like that who are from very impoverished backgrounds, was possibly one of the best things that happened to me, because I got very grounded in reality of what this country is about. My father was also very idealistic, so he ensured that we didn't have any tuition, any external tuition. So whatever I had to learn was either in the classrooms or by myself. That again, I believe on hindsight was the best thing that happened to me, because when you are left to yourself and you need to fend for yourself, you become very good at solving your own problems. And I mean, literally solving your own problems in math, physics, chemistry, etc. So when I was preparing for my entrance exams, I had absolutely nobody to compare myself with, whether it was there was nobody else in my school who was even thinking of going for an engineering entrance exam. So I had to believe that I had to crack every problem I came across. I would sometimes spend about 5-6 days actually trying to solve a single problem. And that actually instilled a lot of confidence in my own abilities and ability to solve my own problems, which later on became problem solving generally in life itself, not just for an entrance exam. And I think this is the reason I managed to get into IIT with a fairly, very high rank actually. I managed to get through to one of the most sought after branches, which is electronics in Madras. And I completed my BTech there. I had a bit of a hiccup because I had not ever spoken a single sentence in English before I went to my IIT. And it was a bit of a struggle for me for the first 3-4 months. I would only stick to one Malayali friend and not speak to anybody else. But over a period of time, because somebody actually pushed me during ragging, saying that you need to start mixing with others, I started pushing myself out of my comfort zone. And then it became easier and easier for me to make new friends. And my perspective really widened at that point in time. I made so many friends that soon it became a party time in IIT. And grades started taking a back seat. So my grades, which started with 8.4, kept going down by about 0.5 every semester, till it bottomed out at about 5 in the 6th semester. And I realized that I may not be able to graduate from IIT. I was very good at partying. I was the soul of every party that would be there. I could make the best alcoholic punch on campus. But that is basically what I learned in IIT in those 5 semesters. And I had so many subjects in which I had failed that the professors started treating me like some kind of a outcast. And that also started reflecting in all my quiz answers and the scores, etc. So I was in a situation where I had been one of the talk of the towns, one of the few people to get into IIT from Kerala in that year. My family was very proud of me. My parents would keep talking about me to everybody. My entire district knew about me as the guy who had cracked IIT. And here I was throwing it all away by nearly getting chucked out of IIT. I think that was possibly one of the lowest points in my life. And I was completely shattered. I didn't know what to do. I was running from pillar to post, asking professors to hold summer courses so that I could make up the lost credits. Obviously, none of them would even listen to me because they knew I was one of those guys who would sit outside the class and bunk the class and sit outside and smoke cigarettes. So this is a point in time when I felt like committing suicide. I was at the lowest point in my life, but I did the best thing that I could have done in that time, which is I confided to my parents everything that has happened. And they actually stayed in IIT for a month without being judgmental, being completely nurturant and supportive. And by the end of the month, they had encouraged me to find my mojo again. And I managed to then graduate from IIT in 5 years instead of 4 years. But that was again, looking back on it, maybe that is one of the best things that happened to me. As the dean told Raj, it's the toughest situation that you face at the age of 19, that then whatever happens in the future, it becomes easier to handle. And I also realized that life is a long innings. You don't have to give up hope every time something goes downwards. I also learned that the best thing to do when going really gets tough is to speak to people who you trust, who love you, and share the burden. After that, my life really took off. So I completed my MBA in XLRI thanks to the fact that I had almost zero fundas in engineering by that time. And I completed the MBA and got into Titan, which is a very sought after company at that time. Spent 6 years there. And then by the end of the 10th year, as a professional, I had become the chief operating officer of Airtel Kerala, Airtel Tamil Nadu, when we were just launching the operation. And it was a terrific, very, very successful career. And I had the best career record in my batch from XLRI. I was very ambitious. I was very driven. My aim was to become the global CEO of a Fortune 500 company by the age of 45. And I thought it would be a cakewalk, considering that within 10 years, I had reached this stage and another 11 years to go before 45. So I could easily become one of those Fortune 500 CEOs. But it was at this stage that I had a slight challenge. I started noticing a slight challenge every time I tried to pick up a spoon or a fork or a pen in my hand, because there were tremors in my hand. It would shake slightly. And every time I tried to climb up or down steps, I would feel that I was about to fall. I met many doctors. None of them could really diagnose what is the problem. So this slowly but inexorably kept getting worse. I switched a couple of jobs thinking that it's a job stress that was creating this problem. So I was in Dell and then I moved to HP. By the time I was 41, which is 7 years after I started noticing this slight tremor, things had become far worse. I was finding it difficult to hold things in my hand, and I would keep tripping every once in a while and fall. And then at 41, I had a fever. I was director of operations for HP at the time. I had a fever, and then the fever spiked the condition very badly. And within 3 days, I was completely paralyzed. I was unable to move my hands or my feet even 1 centimeter. I could not keep my eyelids open. It would keep drooping. because I had no control over the eyelids. And I couldn't even speak properly because my voice was piping and it was very difficult to speak. So this was the time when I was wheeled to the hospital, and then luckily the doctor then diagnosed what is the condition correctly. They said it is called CIDP. It's an autoimmune disorder where my own immune system is attacking the peripheral nerves of my body. So the nerves in my hands and legs were constantly under attack by my own immune system. And that was causing the sheathing of the nerves. It's called myelin. The myelin was being impacted. And without the myelin sheath functioning properly, the electrical impulses do not go from the brain to the muscles. So the net effect was that many of the muscles, especially the fine motor muscles in my hands and legs, hands and feet, had completely wasted away by that time. And once the muscle wastes away, it doesn't come back. So I had already lost many of the fine motor muscles in my hands and feet. But luckily, the good thing was that because of the diagnosis, they could start putting me on the right treatment. So what they had to do was suppress my immune system. To do that, they injected something called IVIG. It's a intravenous fluid, and it was about 36 bottles that went into my body over the next 5 days. And at the end of those 5 days, I started feeling much better. And within a week, I was like, Asterix comics, when they have the magic potion, what happens to their body? My body exactly went through that. It had completely recovered within about 7 days. And I was able to run up to the 9 floors to my office. I could play cricket and football with my kids. I could actually cook for my kids. I went out and bought pizza bases and made pizzas for the children. And I was feeling delighted that finally this disorder seems to be behind me and I could get on with my life. And again, go back to my ambition of becoming a Fortune 500 company CEO. Unfortunately, it's when you have these great dreams again that fate throws bouncers at you. And the condition came back within about 45 days, worse than what it was. I was again wheeled to the hospital, and then that's when the doctor had the courtesy to tell me that the treatment was not a permanent solution, and I had to keep taking this IVIG solution into my body. The problem was that 6 days, 1 dose had cost 6 lakh rupees. So there was no way I could keep pumping in 6 lakh rupees into my body every 2 months. So I had to have alternate medications. They're called steroids. And the steroids have one side effect of suppressing your immune system. But the problem with that is that then you are susceptible to all kinds of diseases. On the other hand, they have enormous amount of side effects. So the steroids make you put on a lot of weight, and it really makes you very lethargic. At this time, I think I'll just share my PowerPoint. So this is what I used to look like in those days. Thanks to the fact that within a matter of 6 months, I put on 16 kilos weight because of the steroids. Then I had cataract. I had to have cataract operation in both eyes because steroids put some kind of a coating on the lens of both eyes. So I had cataract operation. And in spite of all this, I would keep tripping and falling. The condition was just being staved off using the steroids. And I still had to have a smaller dosage of IVIG, which I could afford, maybe a couple of lakhs every 2 months. And the fingers and feet became worse during that time. And I was holding down this very difficult job of director operations in HP. I had to travel quite extensively. Sometimes I had to go to Singapore and US, etc. The jet lag would make the condition far worse. So I remember sometimes for an 8 o'clock meeting, I had to get up at 5 in the morning because it would take me 90 minutes to put on the 6 buttons of my shirt. Putting on a button is almost like an involuntary thing that people do, right? They don't even notice that they're doing it. For me, it was an excruciatingly difficult task because you have to hold the button with 2 fingers, hold the buttonhole on the other hand, and then try to position them correctly and push the button through the buttonhole. First of all, my hands would be shaking constantly, so it was very difficult to put them together. My fingers didn't have the strength to hold the button. Neither did the thumb have the ability to push the button through the buttonhole. And every 2 minutes, I had to drop my hand because my biceps didn't have the strength to hold up my hand to do all this. So sometimes I remember I had to actually lie on the bed to put on the buttons of my shirt because then you don't have to hold your hand up. I would go to the urinal and then I would take 10 minutes to even find my zip because the fingers couldn't find the zip because they didn't have the sense. And they didn't have the strength to pull it down if required. So it was like living hell at that time. But that's when, luckily, some inborn ability kicked in and I kept developing on that, which is that I realized that if I crack a joke, I feel better. And if I enter a room and I tell myself that this room has to be more positive because I am in that room, it will make others a little more positive. I crack a joke, everybody laughs. And then that laughter makes me feel better. And I get into an even better mood. And then it reflects back on the group. So it was a nice virtuous cycle of feeling positive. I would spend time at home with my children. I would tell them completely wacky stories. And I had the ability to just spin stories. So I could actually just tell them stories on the spur. And they would roll around laughing. And that made me feel wonderful. I also took on a lot of additional responsibilities at work. As director of operations, I had some specific roles, but I also said I wanted to be responsible for the entire quality function in the organization. I also took on the entire project management. My idea was that the more I threw myself at my work and kept myself occupied, my feeling of self-worth would improve. So my mind would not focus on my body, which is going to pieces, but it would focus on what I can contribute to the organization. How can I add value to the organization? Well, I used to look forward to every Monday actually going to office. In fact, I put a nice comment, I remember, on my Facebook posts one Monday morning saying that looking forward to another great week at work. And my wife is a little superstitious, so she saw that and she told me, "What's wrong with you? Why do you have to say things like this? Something wrong can happen today." I went to the office. The first call I got was from my boss, who was Vice President Operations for Asia Pacific. And the call was to tell me that I'm being sacked. So there was an investigation which has been going on in the organization for quite some time. It had unearthed some discrepancies in certain things for the previous 6-7 years. But as head of operations, even though I had joined only 6-7 months back, I had to be sacked. The unfairness of the whole thing was like a physical blow. I was in a small conference room. I sat there. I couldn't believe my ears. It was like everything was going dark. And I just couldn't believe that after putting in so much of effort into this organization, I was getting sacked. But that's the reality. Well, I sat and cried for about 5 minutes, and then I decided that maybe I better go home today and see what I can do. So I called my wife and she took me home. And the drive from office to home was about 20 minutes. My wife knows about 6-7 languages. And I heard the choicest galis in 6-7 languages coming from her, which I never knew that she knew all these words about the company. Well, we reached back home. And it took me about 3 hours to actually get over this feeling of absolute despair. Because it was as if nothing in life was going right anymore. One after the other, things were going wrong. But the 3 hours I managed to figure out that there's no point actually focusing on why me or why is God picking on me. I would rather focus on how do I get out of this? What are the strengths that I have? How do I leverage those strengths? And how do I make the best of the situation? The moment I started focusing on the solutions rather than wallowing in self-pity, things started improving. So I realized that there are 2-3 things I could do. One is I could see if I can take legal recourse. I realized that it may not be too much of a point to do that. I reached out to multiple friends of mine who I knew had started startup companies. And I had tremendous amount of strengths as a business leader. And a startup company would love to have me, somebody of my experience, either consulting with them or being part of their organization. And right enough, by the end of the day, I had 2 jobs. And when I got sacked, I was thinking that, my God, I have a 20 lakh annual medical bill. I have 2 children I had to put through school. How do I make the money? I wouldn't even be able to walk up to an interview because I was barely walking in those days. Nobody would give me a job. But then by the end of the day, I had 2 jobs in hand, and I took on one of the responsibilities as a chief operating officer in an education organization. That stint really helped me a lot because it put me in touch with educationists, with schools, and that sort of made me ready for the next phase of my journey. But before the next phase of my journey, I had to fix my physical body as much as possible. The standard traditional medication was not working. And I kept doing my research in terms of how can I fix myself. I knew that my doctor he was a good doctor, but he had far more limitations in terms of his ownership over my body as compared to myself. Nobody could have the same level of ownership over my health as I would have. So it was up to me to figure out how I can fix myself. So I kept researching. In those days, in 2011, the amount of information on Google, etc., was far more limited. But I did find a doctor who was going through a clinical trial in the US for multiple different autoimmune disorders. So I reached out to the doctor, and I became the 18th patient worldwide to enroll for the treatment. So I flew to Chicago, spent 3 months there with my wife. The treatment was a very interesting scientific method. So what they do was they extract the stem cells out of your body. Stem cells are the cells which make new cells. So there's something called hematopoietic stem cells, which are stem cells which make blood cells. So that can be extracted from the bone marrow. It is removed and kept aside. And then they completely knock down my entire immune system using chemo, and there was some rat and rabbit extract, etc. So all this concoction of extremely toxic substances went into my body, and they killed the entire immune system. So this is me actually in Chicago, lost all my hair, and by the end of 20 days, the regimen was there. At the end of the 20th day, I was barely able to get out from bed. I could just stagger to the bathroom, which is 1 meter away, and then come back and lie in bed. But after they injected the stem cells back into my body to regenerate my immune system, I told myself that I need to now really fix my body. So when I could barely get up from bed, I actually put myself a target saying that I'm going to do 1 round around the corridor of the hospital. And that was about 50 meters. I remember that day I had to sit down at least 5 times to complete that 50-meter walk. But I did it. And walking was not very easy because I was still connected to about 6 or 7 bottles through a large vein which is going to my jugular, large line which is going to my jugular vein. And these bottles would be on a stand. the stand had wheels, so I could actually walk with that stand. That was also helping me sort of lean on it and move. So I did that one round, and I came back and I told myself that, okay, tomorrow I'm going to walk 2 rounds. The day after I'll walk 3 rounds. The day after that I'll walk 4 rounds. And I set these targets, and then I started going after it. So next day I did walk 2 rounds. The third day I walked 4 rounds instead of 3. The next day I walked 6 rounds. The next day I walked 10 rounds. So I was actually walking about 500 meters and stopping only once or twice in between. And I was discharged from the hospital. The doctor was very happy at the progress. He said, you can go back to India and recover the rest of your body from there. So I came back and I actually went about fixing every single muscle which had wasted away, except the fine motor muscles, which were irrecoverable. I could actually try and fix most of the gross motor muscles. So I drew up this Excel sheet with 27 exercises for each muscle in the body. And 180 days, I put each date. And for each date, for each exercise, I put a target. And every week, the target would go up. And I would go ahead and beat every single target every single day. That was an enormously empowering experience. Because when you set these small goals and keep beating those goals every day, all of you know, right? The dopamine spurt that happens in your brain just makes you feel wonderful. But more than that, what actually helped was the fact that I had started writing one of the most wackiest and funniest books I have ever read, actually. So it is a book on an alien who had come back in time to save humanity from destruction. And it's a children's science fiction. It's this evolved pumpkin which has traveled back millions of years from the future to save humanity from destruction, because a set of green pigs in another part of the galaxy wanted to destroy humanity. And the green pigs want to destroy humanity because human beings play Angry Birds and kill green pigs. So that was the story. And luckily, the book, I managed to complete the book. I could not type in those days, actually, and I had to use a voice-to-text software because my fingers had no strength to type. But the book actually got published, and it became a big hit among children. And I started being invited to schools to deliver talks. And that's when I could actually leverage my background as an educationist, and I reached out to a large number of schools. They were all delighted to have an author come and present to their children. And I started converting each of these talks to science workshops because I love science, and this is a science fiction of sorts, a wacky science fiction. But I could use the characters from a book to explain what's a black hole, what's a neutron star, how big is the galaxy. And the children would love it. There were times when I could actually hold 800 to 1,000 children in one single hall, packed like sardines, for a whole hour, and the only sound you could hear in that room was the laughter of children. And I realized that I have this immense ability to make people laugh, or make children laugh. And through laughter, I was able to teach them a lot of very interesting lessons. Sometimes I would talk about my life and the lessons I've learned from it. Sometimes I would talk about science and, all kinds of physics stuff and things like that. So it was a very empowering feeling that I was able to make other people happy. So I then wrote my second book, which is called From Ouch to Oops. This is an autobiography, and it's a very wacky kind of an autobiography, but it's written in a very lighthearted fashion. So the book is dedicated to all the protons in the universe who stay positive in spite of all the negativity whizzing around them. And this book became a bestseller from the first week itself. And it's had several reprints after that. And many companies have ordered it in bulk and distributed to their employees, etc. Most people have told me that they found it inspiring, and it's also got translated into Marathi and got published by Sakal, I think. So suddenly I was able to touch many more lives positively. So I decided that I have to have a new target for myself. And my new target became touching 1 million lives positively. So No longer did I want to become a CEO of a Fortune 500 company. I had a very empowering kind of a target, which is to touch 1 million lives positively. I was invited to a company to deliver a keynote address in that time. And for the first time, I gave a public speech about the lessons I learned from my life. And that became the best event of the evening. They voted the best event of the evening. And I realized that this is something I can do now. All this great pain that I have gone through in life, I can encapsulate on that and make it into something really positive. And that has been the journey, the way the journey started about 10 years back. Today, I've addressed maybe about 160, 170 forums, both among students as well as corporates, professionals. I've addressed all kinds of people from 5th standard students all the way to global leadership teams of Fortune 500 companies. I've addressed exclusively international audiences because they heard about me from their Indian counterparts and they invited me for talks. So it's been a very empowering journey. And I focused on adding value to others, which has made me feel really wonderful. So today I call myself the happiest person I have met in my life. And the reason is because I think I focus completely on how do I add value to as many people as I can. Anybody who calls me gets time with me and I would like to support them if they have a problem. I have a vast network, so because after this, I have also worked in Azim Premji Foundation, editing a science magazine for school teachers. In the last 7 years, that book has been doing well. It's called I Wonder. Because of that, I have a very good connect with a lot of scientists across the country, a lot of good teachers. And I have a network in the startup space because I am a co-founder of a tech startup, which is into AI-based fruit grading. Because of that, I have a great set of connections in the ecosystem, startup ecosystem. Because of my work in Azim Premji Foundation, I also know a lot of social sector people and some government connections. So all this I can use to support as many people as I can. So today I have told myself that I need to go out and try and find people to support and help. And the work I'm doing in the foundation, for example, we are setting up a massive healthcare infrastructure across the country, starting with community health, with community health workers drawn from the community, going into the community, promoting and good health and preventing diseases. And I've been part of the core team which actually designed that and set that in motion. So life has been wonderful. And when you have this really lofty goals that you set for yourself, something happens in the universe, and the universe does conspire to actually make it happen for you. So in one of those journeys, I met this lady who was a publisher. I mean, she was a science person, a science educator, and she was working in a publishing firm. She wanted to, she was looking for a job, and I interviewed her, but it didn't work out. But she was very impressed with my story, and she then joined Macmillan. She told me to write a chapter in Macmillan's 8th grade textbook. She wanted me to write about my life story. So today I have, for the last 5 years, this book has been published. It's called English Fairy for 8th grade children. And a chapter of that is my life. So I have this incredible, wonderful feeling when some children actually reach out to me, finding my address or my contacts through social media after reading the chapter in their schools and wanting to reach out and connect with me. So imagine 8th grade kids from Dharmapuri and Ghaziabad and all reaching out and telling me that they got inspired by reading my book, my story. So very ordinary person like me, because of the goals I set for myself, was able to really convert these setbacks into something extremely positive. And I also realized that I needed to, if I wanted to make a difference in the world, I have to start with children. So yes, this textbook, one chapter is something which will help. The many talks I give will help. But these are all small capsules which I'm giving to make a real difference to children, make them positive and make them inculcate the right qualities for them to further contribute to the world. I had to have a long-term association with children. And the only persons who can actually do that are parents. So I got into the act of actually putting together a parenting book. It took me 4 years actually to do that, because what started off as a storytelling session about my own parenting journey and my journey as a child when my parents were parenting me, then metamorphosed into something completely different. And I realized that I had to have a lot more depth in what I'm saying, writing in the book. So I enrolled for a diploma in child psychology. I read up some dozens of books on positive psychology and child psychology. Met many parents, interviewed them, surveyed them to understand what are the issues that they have in parenting. Met up with a lot of leaders in various different fields to find out what their parents did to help them become leaders. And all that together, then I wrote this book called Active Parenting. So Active Parenting is, again, it was number 3 bestseller in the country. It has been number 1 in its category for the last 6-7 months. And it's getting translated, the audiobook is getting translated into Telugu and Tamil. So I have managed to actually touch a lot of parents positively, and I've done about 2 or 3 dozen webinars for parents. I do this free. I believe that it will really have an impact on children. So that is been really my journey. And when Raj reached out to me for leading through adversity, there was the one aspect which really struck me was that, first you have to lead yourself through adversity to be able to be a great leader. And at least the first part of it I have done very well. And the second part of it, yes, to a certain extent I have done well. Many of you have far more experience than me maybe in that area. But I do want to share with you a few things that I learned in this journey about how one can really lead oneself through adversity and then also lead others. So leading self and leading others, the first part is leading self. And these are the few things that I learned. The first thing I learned, which is the faster you accept reality, the sooner that you can get on with life and try to fix the problem. And that 3 hours after getting sacked from HP was, I think, 3 hours too long. If I had accepted the reality immediately, I would have felt far less stress and depression, etc. So how do you cut down the cycle of denial going all the way to acceptance and then positive action? If you can cut down that and then start focusing on positive action, that's the best way to maximize the present. That's the first thing I learned. And, for me, this has been a very, very important way of handling my own life after that. So over the last 5 years, the condition which sort of went off actually came back. I've had a relapse. And I continue to push myself to walk every day, etc. But I keep falling, tripping and falling. In the last 5 years, I must have fallen about 50 times. I've had about 10 fractures. Each time I fall, the way I managed to quickly get over that frustration of the body letting me down is by focusing on, now, what do I do next? So quickly figure out if there is a fracture. If there is a fracture, what to do. If there is no fracture, how do I, put warm compresses or whatever and get myself back into action, and write another LinkedIn post about my latest fall. So whatever it is, right? I mean, so you maximize what you can get out of that and look at something positive out of it. The second thing that I learned is that if you can learn, focus on your strengths, and it'll be far easier to find solutions. So I know that I have a lot of weaknesses. As a professional, I had certain big gaps. I was a soft guy. I was not maybe a very good taskmaster. I would give a lot of leeway to people. So these were my weaknesses. But I did have some fantastic abilities as well. I could motivate a large number of people. I could drive them. I could cheer people up. And I would focus on that all the time as a professional. And that's the same thing that worked for me when I went through my difficulties, right? Especially when I got sacked. It was the ability to actually focus on my strength as a business leader, and then how to leverage that helped me get a couple of jobs quickly. The other one was, this has been a huge lesson for me. I used to be a total believer that you have to be a self-achiever, you have to do things on your own. Till that day, when I was 41, when I was completely paralyzed. And my wife was running from pillar to post trying to figure out what to do. And there was no doctor, whether it was a neurologist or should she take me to a general physician. She had no idea. She reached out to a doctor who had consulted with me in Trivandrum. We were staying in Gurgaon at that time. The Trivandrum doctor took time to reach out to a colleague of his, ex-colleague of his in a Delhi hospital, speak to that doctor who was not a neurologist. Now that doctor spoke to one of his colleagues in the same hospital who was a neurologist, who happened to stay in Gurgaon. And this doctor, the neurologist, at 10:30 in the night, after completing her work in Delhi, drove down to Gurgaon to go to her house. On the way, she dropped in at my place. She didn't know me from Adam, but she spent time there, looked at me, instantly knew it was CIDP. And that is when we figured out it was CIDP. She put me in her car, along with her driver. She lifted me and put me in her car, took me to the nearest hospital, spoke to the neurologist there, got me admitted at 10:30 in the night. Luckily, the doctor was there available at that time, got me admitted and put me on the right treatment. Otherwise, I might have been dead by now. And that instance, I realized, as human beings, we don't have to fight it alone. In fact, it is incumbent upon us to find support and give support. And that's the only way human beings can really survive. Not as individuals, not individualistic. We have to be part of a society, and we have to support the society. So society has to support us. And I have shamelessly taken support from people after that, because I have also been absolutely open to supporting as many people as I can. So today I know that people are meant to support each other. So because I support so many people, I have no problem asking for others' support as well. And 90% of the time, anyway, I ask for others' help to support a third party. But it is my friends, my classmates who started me off on this journey of professional speaking. So 13 of my 57 classmates invited me, not 57, but 120 classmates invited me to their companies to deliver talks. That's about 10% of my classmates did that. And I'm so deeply grateful to them that they let me practice and become better. The other big lesson that I learned is that the buck always stops with you. Irrespective of how many different people have to be influenced, it is finally your responsibility to deliver for whatever you are responsible for. And there could be 100 other people who have to support you to do that, but you have to take the full onus on yourself. So for me, one of the lessons that I learned early in my career was when I joined Airtel. I joined Airtel at the age of 32. and I was general manager sales for Tamil Nadu Circle. I had no idea about telecom. This is the first time I was in a services industry. Now, I didn't know too much about the fact that you need to hold customers. You cannot let them churn out of your service. All this was theoretical knowledge and never practiced by me at that point in time. So when the Circle launched, we set ourselves a target of getting 100,000 connections in 100 days. That is a huge target in those days, where the incumbent operators who were there already, which is one was Aircel and one was BPL. Over the last 6 years, one of them had 180,000 connections, one of them had 120,000 connections. And I told myself, I'm going to get 100,000 connections in 100 days. And I was so driven as a salesperson, and I wanted my career to grow. So I wanted to achieve that target, because it had gone to Sunil Mittal, etc. We have taken this audacious goal. And I drove my sales team like crazy. We realized that enough customers were not signing up, paying the deposit and activation fee, etc. We waived all that. And then what happened is the salespeople under pressure, they started getting databases of premium customers from car companies and this and that, etc. They started activating SIMs and sending it to them saying that this is your new connection. Within no time, we were at some 30,000-40,000 connections. And I realized that these customers are not real customers. We are like fudging the numbers. And worst thing was, we started then invoicing those customers on a monthly basis for their rental. These were people who'd never asked for the connections. And so in a matter of 6 months, the most premium customers in the Circle were all up in arms against us, saying that we are a fraud company. And the responsibility was completely mine. I had completely messed up. So that's when I realized that the buck stops with you. You have to take full onus of everything which is responsible for, and not just your narrow stream which you are responsible for. So end-to-end responsibility means looking at the larger organization and making sure that the larger organization gets the best because of what you do. I have followed that principle after that. And possibly that's why I became the youngest COO after that. In spite of that massive fiasco, I started spending time with all other functions, supporting them, supporting the collections people, the network people, the marketing people, all those other functions. And then they started looking up to me and then getting support from me. And that's why I became a COO within 2 years of this complete mess that I created. So the other thing is, I've had, as I said, multiple side effects of the steroids. One of the side effects came much later, and that I didn't even know that was a side effect. The bones in the hip bones, the bone starts dying from within. It's called avascular necrosis. So both my hip bones were dying from within. And I knew that I met the doctor, they said, you have to do hip replacement. So put prosthetic hip bones, and then that is the only way to survive. Now, for me, that was not a solution. If at the age of 50, if I had to change to have a hip bone replacement, then by 70, I would need to do that again. And that is not a good thing to do. So I wanted to stave it off. I tried multiple alternate treatments, went through a magnetic therapy, went through hyperbaric oxygen. All these were research I did myself, found out possible alternate treatments, went through it. I went through a completely raw food diet for 3 years. And actually, I managed to stave off the condition for a substantial amount of time. Then I went through another clinical trial where they had to drill the bones and then put another set of stem cells into the bone to regrow the bone. So today, after 5 years, I have still not had to do a hip replacement because I've taken ownership for myself. So the buck always stops with you. That's a lesson. And the last one is, I think it is very important in life to have a sense of purpose. it's that sense of purpose which will make one happy in life. Because otherwise you're always meandering without knowing exactly where you're going. And each time you meander, it adds stress to yourself. Whereas if you have a goal, especially a lofty, empowering goal, which you keep for yourself, and every day you take a small step towards that, what it does is that it makes you feel really happy at the end of each day and satisfied at the end of each day. Of course, sense of purpose alone is not enough. It can be very frustrating if you have a great sense of great purpose, but you don't take any steps towards that. The next step is to break down that goal to yearly, monthly, weekly, daily deliverables. Track it and then make sure that you own the deliverables and you make it happen. So these are the 5 things I think I did in all the things that all the different areas that I was addressing. And that has helped me stay positive. And I don't get flustered, or I don't feel demotivated when I go through setbacks. For me, each setback is another opportunity to figure out how can I leverage that to become a strength. And that's been a hugely satisfying journey. Of course, as I said, you cannot do any of these on your own. If you have to lead through difficulties, you have to be able to lead others. And by leading others, I don't mean as a boss, I mean as an influencer, somebody who can carry people along with you. So this is one lesson I learned, is that it's so important to hold people around you close to you. So when in that fiasco that happened in Airtel, and later on my boss was actually sacked, the chief operating officer, because of the mess that was created. The circle was headless for some time. That's when I started going around and talking to people. And I realized that it's very important for people, especially in an organization which did not have a chief operating officer, to look up to somebody, to be able to be cared for. And I played that role very well. And at the end of that year, in spite of the mess that we went through, the employee satisfaction survey in the circle was at 98th percentile. So we had this something called Q12, which is the employee engagement survey that we used to roll out, Gallup's Q12. And we became the 98th percentile globally among teams which they had measured. I think at that point in time, they had measured about 40,000 teams across the world. And to be 98th percentile, that was no mean task. So creating an atmosphere of trust in an organization, making sure that every individual feels cared for. So there were various things that we did at that time. One was, that was the time when we had completed 3 years as a circle. And those 3 years were intensely operational and highly taxing for the people who had worked in those 3 years. So I actually wrote a personal letter as the operational head of the circle. I had not become a chief operating officer at that time. I was a designated operations head. I wrote a personal letter to the parents of those who are unmarried or the spouses of those who are married, and sent them a box of sweets, thanking them for sparing the time of their loved ones so that this organization could actually blossom. There were so many people who reached out back to me, many of the parents, etc. Some of them were in tears, saying that this is such a wonderful gesture and thank you so much. We are so proud that our children are working for your organization, etc. So it's about really making sure that people in the organization felt trusted. The other one was every single time I've had a setback, whether it's a fracture or whether it's a sacking from a company, etc. The one thing I've tried to do is to be in control of my emotions. And that is very, very important when you want to keep a team motivated. they are always looking at the leader, and if the leader's shoulders sag, then obviously they will be apprehensive. They will not have the full josh when they have to go after fixing the problems. So I used to take the pressure on myself and ensure that there is a light atmosphere around me. My wife has had a difficult life. At the age of 10, her mother was diagnosed with what is called motor neuron disorder. Now, the thing is, motor neuron disorder looks exactly like my condition in the initial stages, except that motor neuron disorder is far more dangerous. And by the time she was 15, her mother passed away. So she is somebody who is very anxious and stressed when things go wrong. So it was doubly incumbent upon me every time I had a setback to put up a brave front. I also knew that my children would be watching me, and I had to show that difficulties are something that you can take in the chin and walk, rather than feel stressed out or depressed or, letting myself go by shouting at people or crying or whatever. So it is very important for me to always show a positive front, and that has helped me whether it's in my professional life or otherwise. Now, what I always say is that you have no control over circumstances around you. Very little control, right? And there's a bunch of random variables which happen in so many different domains which can derail your life. But you have absolute control over how you react to circumstances. And that is actually what makes you really powerful or a failure. And the next lesson, which is something which is a quote from my own book, is that when the going gets tough, the tough get humorous. And this, ability to laugh at myself, ability to laugh at the situation I was in, create funny stories around small incidents, look at the absurdity of any situation. This has really helped me. So, writing the book, for example, Oops, the Mighty Gurgle, when I was going through the toughest time, was something which kept my mind alive and active. And so I think having a sense of humor and making the atmosphere light around us is another very important aspect of leading others. And last but not the least is always have a big, hairy, audacious goal and proclaim it out, proudly own it, and then go after it one step at a time, starting with small steps, and then taking larger and larger strides as you go across. So today I have taken on this very ambitious target of touching 10 million lives positively now, because 1 million lives have been touched already through the different kind of work that I do, whether it's work at Azim Premji Foundation, where I was leading the entire pandemic response, where about 13 crore people were helped in terms of their vaccination or set up ICUs and this thing, etc. on one side, or whether I am helping parents bring up children to be better citizens. So I have taken on this goal, and it empowers me. It makes me feel wonderful. And that is the way I think every one of us should actually behave when you're in difficulties. Don't go down because of the difficulty. Think big, and then muster your team around you, make them feel cared, protect them, help them through the entire process, and build trust among each of them, make light of the situations, and go after this big goal. So that's it from my side. I know that is a very long monologue. Thank you for listening to me.
No, thank you so much, Ramji. Every time I hear you, every time I hear your YouTube sessions, I've been freshly inspired. So thanks a lot. It was a fantastic 1 hour session. I never knew how the time went off. So I had a number of questions, but I think you answered a lot of them. But I just want to ask one question, if I may, which probably covers the breadth of everything that you said. How do you keep this optimism running through all the setbacks and challenges that life throws on you? Is it just the natural you that you are, or is it cultivated consciously?
So, if I give all the gyan that I usually give out to all of you people, I feel a little embarrassed about it, but maybe I should still do that. What I've read in my research is that about 50% of what you are is inborn, that's nature. Balance 50% is nurture. So I might have been biased towards being positive, and I must have had a good childhood where my parents actually role modeled some of these abilities. But the one thing I think I've learned is that if you can create this armor for yourself of protecting against negativity by being grateful, by being compassionate, by being authentic, by being collaborative and helpful, and having a great sense of purpose, I think that armor will help you when the going gets tough. So if you proactively practice these things, it is good enough to handle any tough situation which comes your way, is my understanding. It will take, for different individuals, obviously the curve will be different. But if you do all this on a regular basis, I'm sure you will be protected against 99% of the problems that can hit you.
Sure. Thank you so much. I think we are at
Can I ask
7:45. I'd
Can I
like to
ask a
throw it.
question?
Yeah, please. Mr. Sri.
Ramji, very inspiring story.
Thank you.
I just want to understand, how did your wife cope up with all the stress and strain that you've gone through?
So, I am the lucky one who can speak well in a public forum, so I get all the credit. Whereas the actual credit should go to my wife, because she's been there every step of the way with me. And I mean literally every step, because I would push myself to walk even when I was feeling very unsteady and unstable on my feet. But she would then insist on walking with me. And she has a habit of listening to the sound of my footsteps. And the moment the sound changes, she knew that I would be tripping and falling, and she would hold my hand. Even yesterday, the trip to Goa and back, she was there with me. And now she's joined me, actually. We are now planning to do things together after. So she handled the bulk of the difficult tasks, because while I was rebuilding my life, building my career up as a speaker, earning almost nothing in the beginning, she had the job going at Google, and she had to do all the physical hard work, which usually a man would do in the house. She had to do many things which typically the husband would do. She had to take care of the physical aspect of the children's upbringing. What I could contribute was that I took care of the entire education of the children. I was very good at teaching them, and I think I had a great role to play in parenting. But she did all this in spite of the fact that she's by nature a person who takes stress. So I think it is all the more commendable for her to have held up the entire household on her shoulders. So she's an amazing person. Huh?
Any other questions? I think Mr. Bridge, you had posed something on the chat window. Mr. Bridge, I think you had posed something on the chat window. Anything from you?
I had, thank you so much, Raj. I think partly it got answered, but maybe I was looking at, in the most difficult periods of your journey, what kept your hope alive?
So I can't give you a single answer to this, sir. I think it is a culmination of many things that happened. One is spending a lot of time with family, and especially the kids, and making light of situations, and doing the right thing at the beginning, so that it just builds on itself. So I think some of the setbacks in early life actually helped me to look for solutions rather than for wallowing in self-pity. I think these were possibly the ways it did. And as I said, creating the armor for myself. Nowadays I fall every once in a while. And I just take it in my stride. Because I have really put an armor on myself by doing all the positive things. And so it just deflects off me. The negative just deflect. And I think that's how it is.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Ramji, there is a question in the chat box.
Yes.
And I also wanted to ask about that. Role of the family. You talked about your wife. How big are your children and what was their role in this period?
So when it started, I was 34, my children were very young. My daughter was about 4 years old. My son was about 1 year old. When the condition initially started, by the time I was paralyzed, that is about 7 years later, my daughter was 11 and my son was 8. And my daughter was she's a very discerning individual. She knew that something was terribly wrong. And then I was going to the US for the treatment, and the doctor had told me that there would be 2% probability of mortality. And somehow in my discussions with my wife, I think my daughter overheard some of it. And the day we were supposed to fly out, I had to leave for the airport at about 10 o'clock. And 7 o'clock onwards, my daughter started crying. And she was clinging to me and crying and crying and crying. I think that was the most difficult thing in my life, to go and catch that flight, knowing well that I might never return, But as I said, the one thing that I tried to do in this entire thing was to put up a brave front to the children and, make light of situations, laugh with them. I always wanted them to think that difficulties are something which you can handle if you have a positive mindset. And in my book, Active Parenting, also one of the key strategies I have put is role modeling by parents. And so today they are both, I think there must be some influence of the fact that I was always researching on immunology and things like that. My daughter is a doctor. She did her medicine in the med school in Birmingham, UK. She is now practicing there. She's completed first year of foundation years, which is equivalent to what we call residency. She might most probably become a pediatrician. My son is doing 4th year biology, and he's focusing on biotechnology at Edinburgh.
Good.
Sridhar, you have posted a lot on the chat box. Any comments from you?
All I can say is that this has been most inspiring, and I could relate to many of the feelings that he talked about. And I'm feeling absolutely energized and motivated by what he has said. Especially the moments that he talked about where one could feel low and something can be done. All that has been very, very inspiring. And I think these kind of lessons can be useful for people even at our age. I'm 73. And I think that many of the points that he talked about are still relevant to me. We haven't passed that stage where we can do away with shots in the arm from people like him. I'm absolutely grateful and delighted that I was here listening to him today. Thank you so much.
So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Thank you so much.
And in the chat box, I saw some comment from Ruby. Maybe you want to ask Ruby to ask that.
Yeah. Ruby, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. So thank you, Ramji. I mean, I feel very blessed to hear you have heard you today.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
And I hope you keep the inspiration going. A lot of us inspired. I agree with you. When you've gone through adversity, you invariably very automatically look for solutions. I had a question. What was the script in your own head? What were the script to yourself when you were going through all this? Because in spite of all the motivation that comes from inside, ultimately, what you tell yourself is important. So something, it's been a long journey. So I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so I think one of the things was I was very conscious of was that if I let myself go into a negative tailspin, I may not be able to come out of it, because the adversities were so overwhelmingly crushing. There's so much of physical challenge I was facing. So I had to focus, and I had to really push my mind to focus on good things. So the script was actually to keep trying to focus on good things. And luckily, I had the family support, etc., to make that happen. Yeah. So does that answer your question?
Well, it's your journey. I'm just learning from your journey. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Ramji, as I was thinking through your session and all your insights that you posted after that, how much of it was connecting the dots in hindsight? Like what Steve Jobs says, he was going through a difficult time. I mean, when you are actually going through it, there must have been times when you must have been really depressed.
Yeah. So, sir, it's not as if I'm completely immune to feeling despair every once in a while. No? Even at very completely innocuous times when I am doing something completely different, like traveling on a plane, for example, and then my thought moves into, so for me, many things which are easy for normal people is very difficult, So for example, when the air hostess gives me a box of cashews, I can't open it myself. I find it difficult to open a bottle of water with my fingers, right? So many things are very difficult, and sometimes it just sort of, the whole despair rushes into your mind. And then you start thinking about, God, why did this happen to me? And why is this happening again and again and again, hitting me so many times? The moment you do that, you give into despair, right? And I've had suddenly tears spring into my eyes and things like that. But then I do what I just told Ruby, that I sort of try to focus on the good things. And then maybe half an hour later, I'm perfectly fine. So it does take mind ability to sort of control the mind and focus it in the right place. So I do a little bit of meditation and things like that, which has also maybe helped in making that happen.
Thank you so much, Ramji. Any other questions? Any other points, insights?
Yeah, this is Setu. Ramji, that was completely, I don't know, just an amazing hour and a half. So much to learn and take away from. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
I was just wondering, was there any point along the way a spiritual element that played a role that you looked at?
I jokingly say that I became very spiritual in IIT. My favorite spirit was Old Monk Ram and Bullet Beer. But other than that, so I've had a very interesting relationship with God. So there's a very strong, I come from a family where my mother was very religious, and she would go to the temple regularly. As a kid, I used to go to the temple every day in the morning at 6 in the morning. My father used to make us do that basically to make us disciplined, more than actually the prayer to God. So I was brought up in an atmosphere of a lot of religious belief. At the same time, very strong scientific belief as well. So my father was a very strong proponent of science. We used to be part of several science forums. I was a science club president when I was in the 7th grade and all that. So I've always wondered, is there God? What is the proof? And so I was always cynical about the existence of God. It doesn't stop me every once in a while when I go through a really tough time to sit and pray also. So as human beings, we can have two diametrically opposite feelings within us and still manage to live with both of them. And I sometimes do that. The one thing that I can tell you is that when I was going through the real tough phase in my life, my father, who is not really a very God-fearing person or doesn't have too much of faith, he went and consulted an astrologer. And the astrologer gave him 7 prayers which I should do on a daily basis. I ignored it for whatever, 15 years. And then my father passed away, and it was a huge blow to me. I mean, he was the nearest thing to God actually that I have. So after he passed away, I was going through some of my stuff, and I found these 7 prayers that he had written in his handwriting and sent to me. So for the last 3 years, I have been actually praying every day with those 7 prayers. I don't know whether it's psychological funda or whatever. For the last 3 years, I have fallen far less than what I used to do earlier. Maybe my father is looking at me and protecting me from there,
Yeah, I know. Thanks, Yash. Thanks for sharing that.
Suresh, do you have any thoughts? I know you have been active on that window. Suresh, are you there? Okay, I guess. Thank you, Ramji, for a wonderful session. This has been really inspiring every time I hear your talk. So over to Ravi.
No, I think anything said after this is really pointless, but I think for many of us, this has been quite a unique session.
Thank you.
The brief did not do justice to what I would be experiencing in the last 90 minutes. So
Thank you,
like
sir.
Ruby said, we have most of us should feel blessed that we are here today. Very motivating and inspiring. I think we can do with this reminder to protect against negativity at any stage in our life. Like Sridhar said, this is not only for children, for everybody else also. So, a couple of things reminded me of some of the spiritual beliefs which are propagated, that you should, one of the beliefs propagated is you should not get very involved with your own life, be a witness to your life. And to be very happy, you should make others happy. It's easy to say this, but your examples are real life practice of these 2 philosophies. So that's really inspiring. And a couple of new lines I picked up, that when the tough get going, when the going gets tough, the tough get humorous. And the other one is 50% nature, 50% nurture. That's a good reminder that we can do things to help ourselves also. So thank you very much, Ramji. It's been a pleasure. And thank you to everybody else who've been there on the call. We hardly lost only a few people. Sometimes people tend to fall off towards the end, but we lost only a few. So that's again a tribute to how captivating this talk has been. Thank you so much. And thank you, everybody.
I have to thank all of you. I know that most of you are way more experienced than me in life. And thank you for the humility of being present through my session. Thank you so much. I hope that I was able to add some perspective into positive thinking. If you
can add all our names in the 10 million lives you touched.
Thank you so much. Yeah. If you can spread the word, I would be really grateful, because every time somebody talks about me, I think it gives me an additional ability to reach out to more number of people. I do have a podcast channel, which I'm trying to sort of be regular at, and a YouTube channel. It's called Boundless with Ramji. By the way, Ramji is spelled R-A-M-G. Not because I want to sneakily get some respect for everybody by everybody calling me Ramji. Even from my childhood, I was called Ramji, because there were 4 of us cousins: Ram Gopal, Bal Gopal, Ramchandran, Balchandran. We were called Ramji, Balji, Ramsi, Balsi. So that is how the Ramji name came. Thank you so much, everybody. Really
Thank you so much.
Patience. Thank you.
And everybody else, bye and good night.
Good night.
Good night, and thank you very much for a lovely session.
Thank you, Raj.